Hello, everyone. My name is Jason Owen-Smith. I'm the Executive Director of the Institute for Research on Innovation and Science, IRIS. Welcome to the webinar. We're here with myself, Sudip Bhattacharjee, the Director of the Big Data Institute at the U.S. Census Bureau, as well as Barbara Downs, who is also one of our colleagues at the Census Bureau. We still have a few people logging in, so I'm going to give a moment or two for people to get here, and then we'll begin. How about now?
Yes, I can see them, Jason.
Yes, now we can.
Okay, great. Sudip is the Chief of the Center for Big Data Research and Applications at the U.S. Census Bureau and a professor at the School of Business at the University of Connecticut. Sudip, please take it away. Let me know, and I will advance the slides.
Okay, so if you want to advance the slides, that's fine with me. Let me just. All right. Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, as the case may be. As Jason mentioned, I am the chief of the Center for Big Data Research at the Census Bureau. I wear another hat where I am a professor at the University of Connecticut. Today we are going to talk about a product that the Census Bureau is rolling out to the RDCs. The focus of the Center for Big Data Research is to measure different kinds of data types and analyze them for making new products in the census, like what we're going to discuss today, and also to make the existing products better. We get data from surveys, the decennial surveys, and so on. We also get data from observational records in people's activity on Facebook and Twitter and TV viewing and, for example, their mobile phones. We also collect some data from business processes, and that is going to grow. For example, flight bookings and financial transactions, point of sale information, and information about from credit cards to create and make our products much better. And the final types of data that we collect are sensor data like traffic patterns and satellite images, smart electricity meters, and weather information, again, to make our products better or to decrease the cost of working for the Census Bureau while we improve our national statistics. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we use machine learning and big data tools and techniques to make current census products better, cheaper, and faster. We are also in the business of researching and producing new products by combining survey data with administrative records that we have, other transaction information that we have, to improve the current products and create new products like what we are discussing today. Next one, please. So what's the vision of the Census Bureau's Center for Big Data Research? Next slide, please. I'll give you some examples. For example, in Europe, the European Statistical Agency is trying to see if they can use mobile phone GPS information to compute the census of the population, or to at least understand in a timely and manner how the population, the traffic moves from point to point during the daytime versus nighttime. This can decrease the cost of doing a census, and it can also complement the traditional statistics and capture phenomena in real time and in a much more granular fashion. Next slide, please. The example from here on the left-hand side is the actual density of population from the census in Belgium in 2011. On the right-hand side is a survey of mobile phone GPS coordinates in 2015, which can be used to update the census information in a much more granular and timely fashion rather than once in 10 years. Next slide, please. Another example of using big data techniques is to estimate the American Community Survey demographics information, for example, the age, race, ethnicity, and so on, for different census tracts, for example. Next slide, please. So what was done out here was researchers went into Google Street View, looked at 200 cities, and downloaded about 50 million images of those 200 cities from Google Street View, and then focused on the cars on the road, just the cars, nothing else. They had about 22 million cars in the data set, and they identified the cars by make, model, year, body type, trim, and the price. And just by looking at the cars, they were able to train a model and then estimate to about 85% accuracy the age, income, ethnicity of different neighborhoods within those 200 cities. Okay. What this means is that we can actually use publicly available data to accurately estimate some national statistics and do it with much less resources. Next one, please. We are also doing some work by using big data techniques by combining data from local, state, and federal agencies, as well as from companies, to find out the economic impact of rolling out fiber optic internet infrastructure in different jurisdictions within the US. Next slide, please. Now, to shift a little bit our track, we also have interest in big data in operations, and this is a slide that I have borrowed from GE, which says that if we can create 1% savings in different operating industries in the operations of different areas, we can save billions of dollars potentially just with a 1% reduction in inefficiency or increase in fuel savings, for example. Next slide, please. We are also partnering with different companies as well as the Department of Transportation to identify traffic patterns and GPS-based information, which we can use to create different intelligence to find out if, for example, we can reduce costs of transportation, or we can even improve capital asset utilization. Next slide, please. Actually, in the interest of time, I'm going to skip on this slide. Just very briefly, there is a research underway that we are doing, which looks at balancing the supply of electricity with the demand for electricity, something which has to be very, very finely balanced every second of the day, because electricity is very difficult to store. And we are trying to come up with different kinds of mechanisms that balance it from a technical as well as behavioral perspective of users. Next slide, please. This is another area that we are starting in the center, big data in healthcare. So the question that we are asking is, when chronic patients, for example, do not adhere to their medication, why is that? Is it because of income and economic reasons? Is it because of social reasons, that they do not have anybody in their household to help them? Or is it because of geographic reasons, that a pharmacy is not nearby. We are planning to do spatiotemporal analysis by combining data from different medical transactions with the data assets that Census has in terms of our business register, which has a database of all businesses, in terms of our master address file, which has all the addresses of all households, and combining them, we can create a spatiotemporal analysis of how we can identify the determinants of why medication adherence doesn't happen, or even the rampant, fatalities with respect to opioid usage. Next one, please. So I'm going to wrap up. So as you have heard, we are doing a lot of projects. We are open to other innovative projects if you have some, which includes your data as well as an interaction with Census data. My email address is at the bottom. So if you have any questions, please contact us and we'll be happy to partner with you. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sudip. So I'm going to move on. It's Jason Owen-Smith again, and talk to you about one of the projects that is a partnership with the Big Data Center. It's IRIS, the Institute for Research on Innovation and Science. Without going too much into the history, IRIS is a consortium of major research universities. Right now we have about 60 who have committed to join and 30 who have signed our MOU that share data on expenditures for sponsored projects. These data are drawn from administrative databases, usually procurement, HR, and sponsored projects on our campus, transferred to an IRB-approved data repository at the University of Michigan, where we work with the data, clean it up, and integrate it with a variety of sources, and then hand it off to our partners at the Census Bureau. We then make the data that we have linked available through a virtual data enclave to research users, and data that are linked to the Census Bureau information, which we'll talk about in more detail in a second, are made available for research users through the Federal Statistical Research Data Center system. Our colleague Barbara Downs will be talking about that in more detail soon. So my job today is to tell you a little bit about IRIS and a little bit about the data, the core data that we are releasing in documentation. Important thing to know is that IRIS is basically an intermediary organization. It's designed to facilitate data sharing and the transfer of data with appropriate privacy and confidentiality protections and security from data providers, in this case universities, to our partners in the federal statistical system, the Census Bureau, and then to make the entire enchilada reliably, well documented, cleanly, and appropriately, responsibly available to researchers. We're a platform for fundamental social science research. Many of the questions that are being addressed by researchers speak not just to immediate concerns with establishing and understanding and potentially explaining and improving the value of publicly funded research on university campuses, but they're also more fundamental questions pertaining to aspects of entrepreneurship, innovation, education, a number of other fields. And there are many places where the kinds of broad missions that Sudip has outlined for the Big Data Center overlap with some of the work that we're doing. This is also one of the first research and training infrastructures for computational social science that is national in scope. Their training courses that have largely been developed by our colleague who's one of the co-founders of IRIS, Julia Lane, offered now through the Joint Statistical Methods Program, and also through NYU's Center for Urban Science and Progress. We are working now on some introductory courses that will also be offered particular to this data through the ICPSR. So this is a picture of what IRIS looks like. When I say we're an intermediary organization, the idea is that we sit in between the universities, the Census Bureau, our partner, and researchers, with the goal of doing everything we can to streamline both the transaction costs of getting access to data and doing data linkage, and to building an infrastructure that will support a broad range of research, hopefully across many different fields and across the nation. We've now reached the point, after 2 years, we were founded in January of 2015 with initial support from the Alfred P. Sloan and Ewing Marion Kauffman Foundations, where we're able to roll out our first data release. The data, our base data, are available through the IRIS Virtual Data Enclave, which we'll describe more in a second. And the same data, mirrored and linked to Census Bureau resources, is available through the Federal Statistical RDC system. This data release is documented in both places, and where appropriate and allowable, the code we use to make matches, for instance, to outside data sources is also available along with the baseline data. The data include information, transaction level information on sponsored projects expenditures, totaling about $11 billion in 2014 from 19 universities. This is an opening ante. It represents about 16% of total federal R&D expenditures at universities around the country. This will continue to grow. Our set of committed member institutions accounts for about 47% of that spending. There's transactions in the data from about 162,000 federal and non-federal sponsored projects, including payments of wages to 333,000 odd individuals. The vast majority of them are graduate students, undergraduate students, or postdocs, and we make linkages to scientific outcome data for those individuals, and in the Census Bureau system to data that allows us to see career outcomes, earnings, locations of employment, and some indications of entrepreneurship. There's also information on about $18 billion in vendor spending to more than 440,000 establishments, location for a purchase plus an address. The links we've made, links to federal award abstracts, which allow topic modeling and additional information about award funders, are available through the Virtual Data Enclave, as are indicators about dissertation completion. Title 13 crosswalks to several key census data resources are only available through the FSRDCs. To get access to the data through the IRIS VDE, we use a Windows virtual terminal infrastructure. There's no census data available here in any form, but all of the data is mirrored in the VDE. So there's several different mechanisms to use these data. If you want to do research that doesn't require the census data, you can work exclusively through the IRIS Virtual Data Enclave. But if you are, for instance, applying, as you'll hear more about from Barbara, for an external research project in the FSRDCs and need to do some preliminary work to support the your application, or just to get started while it's in process, you can do that in the IRIS Enclave and then transfer it to Census. We do have a restricted access version of our documentation in a wiki format that is intended to allow user updates, and we're working to build the research system. There's an online ticketing system that allows us to identify with your help data and other bugs that we can improve. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but I do ask that you can go and, if you're interested, check out background materials in our FAQ on the IRIS website. This is also a place where you can download and complete the application and data use agreement. And this just gives you a sense of what is available through the terminal. Basically, what happens when you log into this, it's a virtual terminal, shuts down the I/O ports of your machine and essentially turns it into a thin client. You can't add or remove information from the Virtual Data Enclave, but you can work with our research support personnel led by Natsuko Nichols, who can help you by bringing in data if you want to do your own linkage or expansion. There's a variety of software available. Another part of what we're trying to do with these data is not just to make it available and leave it sit, but to do some work to expand the research community. Thus far, more than 70 researchers from 14 institutions around the country have accessed data through either the Virtual Data Enclave or the FSRDC, and we're excited to be able to expand that to include more. We just returned last week from our first IRIS research meeting. We had about 30 research participants get together and spend a day in DC going over work in progress, talking about data improvements, and it's very exciting to see the community come together. One of the most exciting pieces of that is going to be happening hopefully this fall. IRIS has just received a new grant from the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, which will expand our capabilities for research support and allow us for the next several years to make small grants to researchers interested in using these data. We'll be issuing calls for dissertation proposals up to $15,000 and for early and mid-career awards to postdocs and faculty of up to $30,000 for individuals who want to work with these data. So look for that call. I encourage you to go to our website and sign up for our listserv, which will allow us to share information when that call comes out. Our next data release, we're targeting an annual data release, we hope, for winter 2018. And the goal, if we can manage it, is to include data from about 30 universities. This is where you go to sign up for updates on data improvements and training opportunities, as well as news, events, and our newsletter. This is just at our contact page at iris.isr.umich.edu. And I will stop there and say thank you very much and hand it off to Barbara Downs.
Thank you, Jason. So as Jason said, I am going to focus on the Federal Statistical Research Data Centers, and that is the research environment where you would access the data that would be linked together with Census Bureau data. So moving on to the next slide, the meat of the presentation. What is an RDC? Well, they're secure Census Bureau facilities. They're located within one of 25 different universities or Federal Reserve banks across the US. It's important that everyone knows any research, any and all research conducted in the FSRDCs is for statistical purposes only. There's no regulatory research or marketing research, only for statistical purposes. At each RDC, we have a Census Bureau employee on site. That person helps to manage the operations of the facility, and he or she also assists the researchers with their projects, all aspects of the project, except doing the analysis for you. Only authorized personnel are allowed inside the RDCs, and what we mean by authorized personnel are people who have obtained the Census Bureau Special Sworn Status. We call that SSS, and it's granted to personnel who are on approved research projects after they complete a moderate level background check. The SSS persons also swear an oath of confidentiality for life, not just the life of the project, but for their life, promising that they will never divulge the identity of a person or business included in the data that they're allowed to use inside the RDCs. All of the analyses conducted in the RDCs use thin client devices that are connected to the Census Bureau secure data facility in Bowie, Maryland. There's no internet access inside the RDC, and printing is strictly controlled. Our key goal is we want to ensure that no information is inadvertently released from the RDC. And a key step for that is to not print very much, and also to ensure that all output is reviewed both by the local Census Bureau employee and a disclosure reviewer officer here at Census Bureau headquarters. The output is then released electronically, which again is consistent with our minimal printing rules. Nothing is ever removed from the RDC. So the next slide talks a little bit about how the RDCs can be used for collaboration. So every research project has a home RDC. That home RDC manages all the administrative actions on behalf of the project, the proposal development and review, the SSS processing, all the output review, day-to-day things. However, researchers can collaborate across RDCs. The thin client environment certainly makes that feasible. So a researcher who's leading a project at Michigan may have collaborators in California, and they're all working inside the same project space on the secure servers. And should that Michigan researcher move to another part of the US, he or she can move the project with them to a new home RDC. So you'll work with that RDC administrator to coordinate all of those administrative actions that are required to manage the project across all of those locations. So the next slide is how do you actually start a project to use this data? Well, the first step is you develop a research proposal, and each proposal goes through 3 stages of review. First, the local RDC administrator will help you to develop the proposal. The proposal will have 3 parts: an abstract, the proposal itself that describes the project, contribution to the literature, your analysis plan, and the expected output, and a predominant purpose statement. Now, you'll definitely want to be working with IRIS a little bit as you're developing the proposal so you can learn more about the data and ensure that your proposal to the Census Bureau really covers all the bases. Now, the Census Bureau makes its data available via the RDCs under the auspices of Title 13 of the U.S. Code. So this title requires all use of Census Bureau microdata to be in service of the needs of the agency's data collection and processing programs. So every project that uses Census Bureau data has to benefit the Census Bureau. And the RDC administrator will help you to understand the ways in which your research will benefit the programs. Once written, every proposal undergoes 5 concurrent Census Bureau reviews, and I'll cover that on another slide. And then after the Census Bureau approves the project, if the project also uses data from other agencies that participate in the FSRDC program, we'll send it to that agency for review also. So in particular, projects that use business data require IRS approval. So on the next slide, here are the review criteria. Those 5 concurrent reviews evaluate the proposal for scientific merit, whether it requires access to non-public data, the potential benefits of the project for the Census Bureau programs, whether the analyses are feasible given what's available, and the risk of disclosing an individual or a business. On the next one, I'll talk about the benefits. All of the benefits to the Census Bureau are summarized in the Census IRS Criteria Agreement, and that's on our webpage, and the last slide of my presentation includes links. The benefits help the Census Bureau to check the data it collects, edits, and tabulates. It helps us prepare new economic or population estimates that the Bureau just doesn't have the staff resources to prepare themselves. So examples are they allow us to really carefully analyze the data, test various data processing rules, and evaluate whether or not we're measuring what we think we're measuring. This next slide talks about timing. So once the proposal is written, the timing depends a bit for that on how complex the research project is, how much time you and the RDC administrator have in your schedule. Once that's done, then the concurrent census reviews take about 65 to 75 days. After the Census Bureau completes its review, then we begin the SSS application process at the same time that we send the proposal to any other agencies. And both of those steps, they're concurrent and they're usually completed within 3 to 6 months. And now while all of this review is going on, you can also be working with IRIS to learn more about the data and sort of get some preliminary work done that doesn't involve any Census Bureau data. And then once all of the reviews are complete and your SSS has been granted, the project is set to final approved and you can begin work inside a secure RDC using both the IRIS data and Census Bureau data. So then I only have one more slide, and that one shows you the links and my contact information. So if there are any questions that we don't address during the webinar, feel free to drop me a line. Thank you.